What if I told you that everything you think you know about success, happiness, and living a meaningful life is completely wrong? What if the very struggles you're trying to avoid are actually the key to everything you've ever wanted? There's something I've discovered that changes everything, and I can't keep it to myself anymore. Look, I've spent years studying the most successful people in history, the greatest minds, the most resilient individuals who've ever lived. And there's a pattern. There's something they all understood that most people completely miss. Today, I'm going to share with you the most important message I've ever discovered. This isn't just another productivity hack or motivational speech. This is about fundamentally changing how you see reality itself. Here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. We live in a world that's completely obsessed with comfort. Everyone's trying to avoid pain, avoid difficulty, avoid anything that makes them uncomfortable. We've built entire industries around making life easier, more convenient, more pleasant. But here's what's really happening. This obsession with comfort is destroying us. Think about it. How many people do you know who are genuinely happy? I mean, really truly satisfied with their lives? Not just posting happy pictures on social media, but actually content with who they are and what they're doing. The number is probably pretty small, right? And it's not because they don't have enough stuff. We have more material wealth, more entertainment options, more convenience than any generation in human history. Yet anxiety rates are through the roof. Depression is skyrocketing. People feel more lost and purposeless than ever before. The problem isn't that we don't have enough. The problem is that we've forgotten something fundamental about human nature. We've forgotten that struggle isn't the enemy. It's actually the thing that makes us who we are. The comfort trap that's killing your potential. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're a muscle. What happens to a muscle that never gets stressed, never gets challenged, never has to work hard? It atrophies, it gets weak, it becomes useless. The same thing happens to your mind, your character, your entire being when you constantly choose comfort over challenge. But we've been conditioned to believe the opposite. We think success means having enough money so you never have to worry. We think happiness means never feeling stressed or anxious or uncertain. We think the good life is one where everything is easy and predictable. This is completely backwards. The people who achieve the most, who feel the most fulfilled, who make the biggest impact, they're not the ones who avoided difficulty. They're the ones who ran straight toward it. They understood something that most people never figure out. Your capacity for handling difficulty directly determines your capacity for achievement and fulfillment. Think about every skill you've ever developed. Did you get good at it by doing easy things? Of course not. You got good at it by pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, by doing things that felt uncomfortable and challenging. The same principle applies to every aspect of life. When you constantly choose the easy path, the comfortable option, the safe route, you're not just avoiding temporary discomfort, you're avoiding growth itself. You're choosing to stay exactly who you are instead of becoming who you could be. And here's what's really happening in our modern world. We've created entire systems designed to keep you comfortable and complacent. Every app on your phone is engineered to give you instant gratification. Every streaming service wants to eliminate the discomfort of boredom. Every convenience store, fast food restaurant, and delivery service exists to remove any minor inconvenience from your life. But what we don't realize is that these conveniences aren't just removing discomfort from our lives. They're removing our ability to handle discomfort altogether. We've become so accustomed to getting what we want immediately that we can't tolerate any delay, any challenge, any situation that requires patience or persistence. We've trained ourselves to quit the moment something becomes difficult because we've always had an easy alternative available. Look around at the people in your life. How many of them are truly thriving? How many wake up excited about their day, passionate about their work, confident in their abilities? The honest answer is probably not many. And it's not because they lack talent or opportunity. It's because they've spent years taking the path of least resistance, and now they lack the mental and emotional strength to pursue anything meaningful. The really tragic part is that comfort doesn't even make us happy. It just makes us numb. When everything is easy, nothing feels rewarding. When there's no struggle, there's no sense of achievement. When you never have to overcome anything, you never develop confidence in your ability to overcome things. You end up feeling weak, helpless, and dependent on external circumstances for your well-being. But the moment you start deliberately choosing difficulty over ease, something incredible happens. You start building what I call challenge immunity. Just like your physical immune system gets stronger when exposed to pathogens, your mental and emotional immune system gets stronger when exposed to challenges. The things that used to stress you out or overwhelm you start feeling manageable. Problems that used to seem impossible start looking like puzzles to solve. This isn't about becoming a masochist who enjoys suffering. It's about understanding that temporary discomfort is the price of permanent strength. It's about recognizing that the skills you need to create an extraordinary life, resilience, persistence, creativity, problem-solving, emotional regulation, can only be developed through practice. And you can only practice them when you encounter situations that require them. The comfort trap is so insidious because it feels good in the moment. Choosing the easy option always provides immediate relief, but it's like borrowing happiness from your future self. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're making tomorrow's challenges harder to handle. Every time you avoid discomfort today, you're guaranteeing more discomfort tomorrow. The bills always come due, and they come with interest. The solution isn't to make your life unnecessarily difficult or to seek out suffering for its own sake. The solution is to start viewing challenge as an investment in your future capacity. Start seeing discomfort as information rather than a problem. When something feels difficult, that's your signal that this is where growth lives. That's your invitation to become stronger, more capable, more resilient than you were before. The ancient secret that modern life is forgotten. There's an ancient philosophy that understood this principle better than anyone. It taught that the key to a good life isn't avoiding difficulty. It's learning how to think about difficulty correctly. It's about understanding that external events don't determine your internal state. You do. This philosophy taught that there are only two types of things in this world: things you can control and things you can't control. And here's the revolutionary part. Your happiness and peace of mind come entirely from focusing on what you can control and accepting what you can't. Most people have this completely backwards. They spend all their energy worrying about things they can't control: other people's opinions, the weather, the economy, what happened in the past, what might happen in the future. And they completely neglect the things they can control: their thoughts, their actions, their responses, their character. But when you flip this around, when you start focusing all your attention on what you can actually influence, something amazing happens. You become incredibly powerful, not because you can control everything that happens to you, but because you can control everything that matters: how you respond to what happens to you. This shift in perspective changes everything. Suddenly, setbacks become opportunities to practice resilience. Criticism becomes a chance to examine your character and improve. Uncertainty becomes an adventure instead of a threat. Pain becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. But implementing this ancient wisdom in modern life requires understanding just how far we've drifted from these principles. We live in an age of unprecedented external focus. Social media trains us to constantly compare our internal experience to other people's external presentations. News media floods us with information about events we have zero influence over, but makes us feel like we should be worried about them anyway. Advertising convinces us that our happiness depends on acquiring things that exist outside ourselves. We've created a culture that systematically trains people to look everywhere, except the one place where they actually have power within themselves. The ancient philosophers understood something we've forgotten. The only reliable source of peace and strength comes from developing your internal world. They knew that external circumstances are inherently unstable and unpredictable, but your character, your values, your thinking patterns, your responses, these things can be developed and strengthened regardless of what's happening around you. They practice what we might call radical responsibility, taking complete ownership of their experience even when they couldn't control their circumstances. This doesn't mean being naive about reality or pretending that external events don't matter. It means recognizing that your power lies in your response, not in trying to control things beyond your influence. When you get fired from a job, you can't control that decision, but you can control how you interpret it, what you learn from it, and what actions you take next. When someone treats you unfairly, you can't control their behavior, but you can control whether you let it affect your peace of mind and how you choose to respond. The practical application of this ancient wisdom starts with developing what I call response awareness. Most people live on autopilot, reacting automatically to whatever happens to them. Something good happens, they feel good. Something bad happens, they feel bad. Their emotional state is completely dependent on external events, which means they're essentially powerless. But when you develop response awareness, you create a gap between what happens and how you react. In that gap lies your freedom. This requires daily practice of paying attention to your thoughts and reactions. When something happens that typically would upset you, pause and ask yourself, what part of the situation can I actually influence? Then direct all your energy toward that part. When you catch yourself worrying about things beyond your control, consciously redirect your attention to what you can control instead. When you notice yourself depending on external validation for your self-worth, remember that your value comes from your character and actions, not from other people's opinions. The ancient secret isn't really a secret at all. It's just been buried under layers of modern distraction and external focus. The wisdom is simple: your internal experience is your responsibility and your power. Everything else is just circumstances to respond to. When you truly internalize this, you become unshakable, not because bad things stop happening to you, but because you've developed the strength to handle whatever comes your way while maintaining your peace of mind and sense of purpose. This is liberation in the truest sense. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's moods, economic conditions, political events, or any other external factors. You've built an internal foundation that can weather any storm because it doesn't depend on external support. This is what the ancients understood that we've forgotten. True strength comes from within, and once you develop it, no one and nothing can take it away from you. Why your biggest problems are actually your greatest gifts. Here's something that's going to sound crazy at first, but stick with me. Your problems aren't obstacles to your success. They're the very thing that will create your success. Every challenge you face is actually an invitation to become stronger, wiser, more capable. Think about this logically. What happens when you solve a difficult problem? You develop the skills and confidence to solve similar problems in the future. What happens when you overcome a fear? You prove to yourself that you're more capable than you thought. What happens when you push through something that feels impossible? You expand your sense of what's possible. But most people run from their problems. They try to avoid them, delegate them, ignore them, or complain about them. They see problems as evidence that something is wrong with their life. But what if problems are actually evidence that you're alive, that you're growing, that you're in the game? The most successful people I know don't have fewer problems than everyone else. They have bigger problems, more complex problems, more important problems. Because as you grow, your problems grow with you, but so does your capacity to handle them. When you start seeing problems as opportunities for growth, instead of obstacles to happiness, your entire relationship with life changes. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start being the author of your own story. But this shift requires understanding something fundamental about how growth actually works. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. It doesn't happen when everything is going smoothly. It happens in the space between where you are and where you want to be, and that space is always filled with problems to solve. Think about the most meaningful periods of your life. Were they the times when everything was easy and comfortable, or were they the times when you were facing significant challenges that forced you to dig deep and discover capabilities you didn't know you had? Most people, when they really reflect on it, realize that their proudest moments, their biggest breakthroughs, their most significant growth all came during periods of difficulty and struggle. But our culture has trained us to see problems as inherently negative. We're taught that a good life is a problem-free life. We're conditioned to believe that if we're facing challenges, we must be doing something wrong. This is not only false, but actively harmful because it prevents us from extracting the value that problems contain. Every problem is a teacher. Every challenge is a curriculum. Every difficulty is a gym for developing strengths you'll need later. The key insight here is that problems don't just build your capacity to handle similar problems in the future. They build your general resilience, creativity, and problem-solving ability. When you successfully navigate a financial crisis, you don't just learn about money management. You learn about persistence, creativity, resource optimization, and emotional regulation under pressure. When you work through a relationship conflict, you don't just improve that relationship. You develop communication skills, empathy, patience, and emotional intelligence that serve you in every area of life. This is why the most valuable people in any organization are the ones who can handle difficult situations. They're not valuable because they never encounter problems. They're valuable because they've encountered so many problems that they've developed the skills to solve almost anything. They've built what you might call problem-solving muscle memory. They see challenges as puzzles to solve rather than threats to avoid. But here's where it gets really interesting. The problems that feel the most overwhelming, the most unfair, the most impossible, these are often the ones that contain the greatest gifts. They force you to develop capacities you never would have developed otherwise. They reveal strengths you never knew you had. They connect you with resources and people you never would have found in easier circumstances. I've seen this pattern over and over again. Someone faces what seems like a devastating setback, a job loss, a health crisis, a relationship ending, a business failure. And initially it feels like their world is falling apart. But then something remarkable happens. They're forced to develop new skills, explore new possibilities, connect with different people, and discover aspects of themselves they never knew existed. Years later, they look back at that crisis as the best thing that ever happened to them, because it catalyzed a transformation they never would have chosen, but desperately needed. This doesn't mean you should go looking for problems or that you should be grateful for genuinely tragic events. It means you should recognize that since problems are inevitable in any worthwhile life, you might as well extract the maximum value from them. You might as well use them as raw material for building the person you want to become. The practical application of this principle is to start asking different questions when problems arise. Instead of, why is this happening to me, ask, what is this here to teach me? Instead of, how can I get rid of this problem as quickly as possible? Ask, how can I use this situation to develop skills I'll need in the future? Instead of, this is ruining my life, try, this is preparing me for something I can't see yet. Your biggest problems really are your greatest gifts, but only if you unwrap them correctly. Only if you approach them with curiosity instead of resistance, with gratitude instead of resentment, with courage instead of avoidance. When you do this, you transform from someone who suffers problems into someone who harvests them for growth, wisdom, and strength. The power of internal focus in an external world. We live in a world that's constantly trying to pull your attention outward. Social media, news, and other people's drama, comparison, competition, everything is designed to make you focus on external things that you can't control. But real power comes from internal focus. It comes from developing yourself, your skills, your character, your thinking. It comes from being so grounded in your own values and principles that external chaos can't shake you. This doesn't mean you ignore the outside world or become selfish. It means you approach the outside world from a position of strength instead of weakness. You engage with it intentionally instead of reactively. When your sense of worth comes from internal things, your integrity, your growth, your contribution, instead of external things, other people's approval, material possessions, status symbols, you become unshakable. You can weather any storm because your foundation is solid. This is incredibly practical. When you're interviewing for a job, you're not desperate for their approval because your confidence comes from knowing you've prepared well and will give your best effort. When someone criticizes you, you can listen for useful feedback without being devastated because your self-worth isn't dependent on their opinion. When things don't go according to plan, you can adapt and adjust because you're focused on what you can control rather than what you can't. The discipline that creates true freedom. Here's another paradox that most people get wrong. They think freedom means being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. But that's not freedom. That's just impulse. Real freedom comes from discipline. It comes from having the strength to do what you know is right, even when you don't feel like it. Think about it. Are you more free when you're a slave to your emotions and impulses? Or when you can choose your response regardless of how you feel? Are you more free when you're dependent on external circumstances for your happiness? Or when your peace of mind comes from within? Discipline isn't about punishment or restriction. It's about building the internal strength to live according to your values instead of your feelings. It's about creating the capacity to pursue long-term goals even when short-term temptations arise. This kind of discipline starts small. It starts with keeping promises you make to yourself. If you say you're going to work out, you work out. If you say you're going to read for 30 minutes, you read for 30 minutes. If you say you're going to wake up at a certain time, you wake up at that time. These might seem like tiny things, but they build something incredibly powerful: self-trust. When you know you can count on yourself, when you know you'll follow through on your commitments, you become capable of attempting bigger and bigger challenges. How to build unshakable inner strength. So, how do you actually develop this kind of inner strength? How do you build the capacity to remain calm and focused regardless of what's happening around you? It starts with practice. Just like physical strength comes from regularly challenging your muscles, mental and emotional strength comes from regularly challenging your mind and emotions. Start paying attention to your thoughts. Most people never examine what's going on in their heads. They just accept whatever thoughts show up and react accordingly. But you have the ability to observe your thoughts, question them, and choose which ones to act on. When you notice yourself getting upset about something, pause and ask, is this something I can control? If yes, what action can I take? If no, how can I accept this and focus on what I can control instead? Practice delaying gratification. When you want something immediately, wait. When you feel like quitting something difficult, keep going a little longer. When you want to react emotionally to something, Take a breath and choose your response instead. Develop a daily practice of reflection. Spend time each day thinking about how you handled challenges, what you learned, how you can improve. This isn't about beating yourself up for mistakes. It's about consciously growing from experience. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to be better. Avoid people who encourage you to stay comfortable and mediocre. Seek out environments that demand growth and excellence. Most importantly, start viewing every difficulty as training. Every setback is practice for resilience. Every criticism is practice for handling feedback. Every uncertainty is practice for courage. Every temptation is practice for self-discipline. Here's the moment where everything clicks together. The message I've been waiting my whole life to share with you is this: you are far more capable than you think you are. The life you want isn't on the other side of more comfort, more convenience, or more external validation. It's on the other side of becoming the kind of person who can handle whatever life throws at them. You don't need perfect circumstances to live an extraordinary life. You don't need everything to be easy. You don't need everyone to understand or approve of what you're doing. You just need to develop unshakable confidence in your ability to figure things out, to adapt, to grow, to persist. This isn't about becoming hard or cold or emotionless. It's about becoming strong enough to remain kind when others are cruel, patient when others are reactive, focused when others are distracted, optimistic when others are pessimistic. The world needs people like this. The world needs people who can remain calm in chaos, who can think clearly under pressure, who can maintain their values when it would be easier to compromise them. Everything I've shared with you today comes down to one simple truth. Your external circumstances don't determine your internal experience. You do. The quality of your life isn't determined by what happens to you. It's determined by how you respond to what happens to you. When you focus on developing your character instead of controlling your circumstances, when you see challenges as opportunities instead of obstacles, when you build discipline instead of seeking comfort, when you cultivate inner strength instead of external validation, you become truly. This isn't easy. It requires constant practice, constant growth, constant commitment to becoming better than you were yesterday. But it's the most important work you'll ever do, because it determines everything else. You have a choice right now. You can keep living the way most people live, reacting to circumstances, seeking comfort, avoiding difficulty, depending on external things for your happiness. Or you can start living like the person you're capable of becoming, someone who creates their own experience regardless of what's happening around them. The path forward is clear. Start small, but start today. Choose one area where you can practice focusing on what you can control instead of what you can't. Choose one challenge you've been avoiding and face it head on. Choose one discipline you can commit to and follow through, no matter how you feel. Your future self is waiting for you to make this choice. The person you're meant to become is on the other side of the comfort zone you're living in right now. If this message resonated with you, hit subscribe, because there's so much more we need to explore together.